Welcome to the Birds and the Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson.
That's the key. People aren't talking about it.
Everybody needs to know that porn is not a documentary.
It's not like if we don't talk to kids about sex and sexuality, they're not going to hear about it. They're just not going to hear about it from us.
They have tons of questions. They just don't know how to ask them.
All you have to do is be one chapter ahead. You don't have to know everything. Just one chapter ahead of wherever your child is.
Hey everyone, this is Braxton Dutson, your host of Birds and Bees podcast. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist, and every episode of this podcast is meant to bring you information from the top professionals in relational and sexual health. I want you all to have the tools and tips you need to improve your relationship with your partner and feel confident in teaching your children about sexual health and relationships. That's why today I'm doing the show, and we are bringing in Nate Bagley. So Nate Bagley is coming in to talk about relationships, and he does a podcast called the Loveumentary. Now, the reason I wanted to bring Nate in is because he has so much information about how couples, well, he's been interviewing couples for years about how to rid the world of mediocre love. And that's his goal. That's his mission in life. And I wanted to glean a little bit more of the information off of him of what he's learned over the years by talking to these extraordinary couples and what they do to improve love and connection and their relationship. The conversation we have in the interview is a wonderful conversation. It's great. We end up talking about what the Loveumentary is, and he talks to me about some highlights about what he's learned about sex, building intimacy, talking in your relationship, as well as how to take it from a mediocre love to an extraordinary love. And it's just my favorite. I love talking to Nate. I've been wanting to have him on the Birds and Bees podcast for quite some time. So one of the things that he ends up leaving us with, well, you know what, I'm not going to get to spoiling the rest of the podcast, but he talks about different ways to start taking your love to that next level. So if you're in a relationship, whether you're feeling like it's going great or that there could be some changes, Nate is challenging you to take your relationship to higher heights and to avoid this mediocre love that so many couples can get stuck in. So this episode is for everybody. But first, I want to remind you guys that we love when you send episodes to your friends and family. There's a good chance you know someone who could use extra support or the information that we're talking about in this podcast. Please think of sending them a link or just even telling them about the show, referencing them over. It takes just a couple seconds, and you really could make a big change in someone's relationship with their children or their partner. I have a lot of people that end up telling me how much they enjoy the show and they learn from these interviews. They have a lot of information that they glean from the topics that we talk about. So if this is you, please tell me what your experience is and what you've enjoyed about the podcast through a review on iTunes. This helps us reach even more parents and couples who are looking for a show like ours, like Birds and Bees podcast. So take a minute, leave us a review. That would mean so much to me, and it changes the entire dynamic of how the show gets spread to everyone else. Thanks again for tuning in on birdsandbeespodcast.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and any other format that you may be listening on. Those just tend to be the most popular ones. Check us out at birdsandbeespodcast.com if you haven't gone over there. And join the conversation. Let us know some of the ideas that you'd like to have us cover. If you want me to interview somebody on a certain topic, give me a call at 385-449-1818. Leave a message saying, hey, I want to hear about this, or hey, I really love the show. Whatever it is that you want to give, I love your feedback. So without further ado, let's head on into the interview with Nate Bagley. And thank you again for tuning into Birds and Bees podcast. All right, welcome to Birds and Bees podcast. I'm here with Nate Bagley. Now, Nate Bagley, the reason I have him on the show today is because he has been doing so many different things when it comes to relationships and learning how to, well, his goal, and we'll talk more about what his life goal is, but it is to rid the world of mediocre love. And I think that's a beautiful passion to have, and I think it's something that each one of you would be interested in knowing more about. So I'm really excited to bring him onto the show. Thank you for being here, Nate.
You got my goal right.
I know. It's
so good to be here, man. I've been waiting for a long time to be on your show.
Yes, and I've been, excited to thinking of what am I going to ask Nate Bagley, this guy that has been doing the Loveumentary. How long has that been going on for?
Loveumentary has been going on for like 5 or 6 years now. And it's been off and on. Like there's sometimes I've had my fair share of gaps. Like I took a year off, but
and now you're doing seasons.
Yeah, now I'm doing seasons, just because it's a little bit more manageable. You know how it is to do a weekly. Well, but yours is bi-weekly.
Mine's bi-weekly.
Yeah, and that's a lot.
Yeah,
and doing it weekly is just it's like you're constantly finding new guests, setting up appointments, doing interviews, editing interviews, writing articles, and it's exhausting. So I decided to start batching them so I can breathe in between.
Yeah, and that's I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do with whether keeping it bi-weekly so I can do some writing as well.
Right.
I'm setting it up to do that. So hopefully Birds and Bees
just
podcast
do what's best for you. That's my recommendation.
Well, that's what I'm excited about, is kind of seeing what where the podcast goes.
Well, I'm excited for you, and I'm glad to be here. So thanks for having me on as a guest.
Yeah. Well, today what I'm really excited about talking to you about is essentially the passion that you have with building relationships in couples. I mean, you've had a couple of TED Talks. And
just one.
Oh, just one.
Just one.
I thought you had two. Okay.
I'd love to apply to do another one, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to see the next one that you do. And the one that the project that you've started recently, the 1%.
The 1% Club? Yeah.
I'm really excited about learning where you're going with that, because I've been right here at the very beginning of the 1% Club.
Yeah. You're like founding member, original gangsta.
Yeah. OG.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah. So tell me, I'm curious about a little bit about what when you found out that you had this passion, and when you started, how you started moving towards, I'm going to rid the world of mediocre love.
Yeah. So it's a great question. I appreciate you for asking it. I think it all started with a problem. I heard a quote a while back, and this resonated with me, but I believe that extraordinary people have extraordinary problems. And maybe I'm being a little egotistical and calling myself an extraordinary person and lumping myself in with that. But I had a big problem that I wanted to solve. And that problem was, I really wanted to get married one day. I wanted to be an awesome husband, like awesome. Like in the way that, like when my future wife was going to go hang out with her girlfriends, she'd be like, "You guys, I am so lucky to be married to Nate Bagley. I cannot believe how lucky I am. This guy is amazing. He's such an awesome husband." Instead of, the typical like, "Yeah, we're okay. My husband's all right." I never wanted my wife to consider me to be like average or even bad as a husband. So, I noticed in my dating relationships that my relationships were failing a lot, and I was getting scared and running away from a lot of things, and I think a lot of things just weren't working out the way that I wanted them to, and I realized that I was lacking a lot in the skill set that would set me up to be a great husband, but I didn't know where to learn that stuff. Like, there's no real relationship school. There's like, this is stuff that you don't learn in college or in high school or in elementary school, like husbanding 101. Like, that's not a thing, So I decided that if I wanted to get answers to these questions and really learn how to be an extraordinary husband, the best thing I could do was go and learn from other partnerships, other marriages who were doing it right, and see what they did that differentiated them from everybody else. Like, what did the most extraordinary, amazing couples do that everybody else misses out on? Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted to figure out. So I started interviewing couples and found really quickly that there were relationships that existed out there in the world that were so awesome, and I had no idea a relationship could look like that.
Wow.
And I started sharing these stories, and other people were like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that was possible either. I want that. Like, I want to steal that thing, and I want to steal this thing from this couple, and I love what this couple said over here, and we're going to steal their family mission statement or their motto, and we're going to steal their goal, and we're going to steal the way that they deal with conflict." And people started cherry picking their very favorite things and integrating them into their own relationships. And I'm like, man, like, we need more of this. The people who have the microphone in the world are so often the people who suck at love. Mm-hmm. You've got like the Kanye West and the Kim Kardashians and the Bachelor, and all these examples of what I would say is not really, people don't aspire to have that kind of a relationship. Maybe they aspire to the fame aspect of it, mm-hmm. but not to the quality of love.
Well, and I see a lot of people, especially when it came down to Beyonce and Jay-Z, where they were idolized.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, was it Lemonade came out, and they were like, oh my gosh, this relationship's not as perfect as we thought, and it crushed. So it was either you're idolized or you have this really horrible relationship, instead of, hey, you can idolize our relationship but know that there are issues.
Right. Or you look at the great people who've fallen, like Tiger Woods is a great example. Who else is lately? I mean, even just the Me Too movement lately, where there's people that have been looked up to and had their public image tarnished because they're not as great as people thought they were.
Yeah, looking from perfection all the way down to, oh crap, no,
right. So I'm looking at the people who, my goal is to look at the people who have extraordinary love and give them the microphone, not the people who are screwing it up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it started. And as I started gathering these stories, I started to learn that I have a passion for solving this problem. And the problem that I see is that there's a world that's chock full of mediocre love. And the worst part of it is that most people are ignorant to how mediocre they are. They don't understand how easily just changing a few small things could literally transform their relationship and turn it into something extraordinary, because they're just average enough that they're comfortable. And there's just enough things going wrong and enough things going right that they're like, well, I don't need to change anything because my life is fine. But if they just experienced a little bit more pain or a little bit more discomfort, it would motivate them to change and transform into something much, much better.
So the mediocre love that you're talking about is that space where I'm okay. I don't really need to change anything about the relationship. Let's just let it be until we either need to really affect something big.
Yeah. On either side. Where basically your relationship is an afterthought. I think a great tell that you have a mediocre love is that it's not something you think about regularly. Nobody ever became truly excellent at something by accident. No. You don't become the best at something completely by accident. It's something that you focus on and think about constantly that drives you to become the best. And if you want to have the best marriage, it needs to be something, or relationship, whether you're married or not, doesn't matter. But it needs to be something that you're constantly focusing on. So if your relationship is an afterthought to you, if it's something you think about once a week or once a month instead of something that you think of every single day, then it's probably a good sign that you're in the mediocre camp, and that you could amp up your game a little bit.
Yeah. And so it's even in the space of going, well, your relationship isn't bad, but what would it be like to take to the next level?
Yeah. What would it be like if it was extraordinary? What would it be like if you woke up every morning like electrified and excited to be with your partner, and you went to bed every night with like gratitude in your heart that you were with this person, and that you created the type of relationship that other people looked to for inspiration and motivation and thought like, oh my gosh, I wish I could have something like that. The kind of relationship that set an example for your kids, to have like healthy conversations and know how to deal with conflict and know when they were being loved and when they were being manipulated, and where they felt completely honest and capable of being open about anything, even their deepest, darkest secrets. They knew that they could share them with you because they know that you're not going to like throw judgment their way.
Wow.
And that stuff it all starts with how you treat your partner. If your kids see you treating your partner in a way that like they can share their most difficult struggles and trials, they're going to feel free to share the same thing with you,
Yeah.
And if they can see you navigating conflict with grace and poise and respect, they're going to be able to do that themselves. And if they see you being respectful even when you disagree with somebody, they're going to be able to emulate that. But like that's the stuff of extraordinary. And ordinary, the average stuff, it's fine if that's what you want, but there's so much better.
Why?
Yeah, there's so much better out there.
And this is taking Birds and Bees podcast to a different level, because normally we're talking about, okay, tell us how to talk to your kids about having a good relationship, or how is this, let's speak to how the couples can build a good relationship. What are the 5 things or whatever it may be?
Right.
But I love that this piece is you're going to be working on your relationship with your partner, and you are going to be teaching almost through osmosis the way that your children are going to have this relationship too.
Through osmosis, but also intentionally. I know, so you can see right here hanging over my desk, I have a little sign.
Yes.
And this is not osmosis. This is like, I read this out loud to myself every single day. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Sorry, you can take it off if it's too small of print.
No,
but-
I think I've got it. I am a 5-star husband. I am a powerful entrepreneur with a message that will change the world. I create my life. I am 100% responsible. I am 100% committed. When I get knocked down, I get back up. When I get knocked down again, I keep getting back up. I can have anything in life when I pay the price. I do what is required to create the life I want by acting in spite of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and moods. I see the gift in every obstacle. I am the man. When I create value, dollars follow. I choose prosperity. I love my life, I love my wife, and I love myself.
So every day I say that to myself.
Wow.
Every day, every morning.
Did you create that? Where did you find that?
It's an amalgamation of a couple of different things that I've like experienced and gone through and stolen from other people and created for myself.
That's wonderful.
But this is something that I do with myself. My wife and I have like things that we repeat to ourselves all the time for our marriage. And when I have kids, this is going to there's going to be a variation of this that I pound into them every day.
Uh-huh.
You know, I have a mentor who does this with his kids. He has these, like, I think it's 14 values that they say on the way to school every single day. And then they have like a family motto that they share. And part of that family motto is like he tells his kids, when I get knocked down, I get back up. And they say that every day on their way to school. And then when they go to football practice and their kid gets knocked down, he gets down by them and goes, when I get knocked down, what? And he goes, I get back up. And the kid gets back up, you know?
Nice.
Or like the kid will say, Dad, I want a bike. And he'll say, I can have anything in life. And the kid says, if I pay the price. And so he's like, great. So what's the price? $120? Great. So here's what you can do to earn $120 so you can have that bike.
Yeah. Pay the price.
And he teaches them these things, not by osmosis, not just by living them, but because he teaches them every single day. They memorize this, you know, like it's part of who they are. Part of their family motto is no secrets. That's me and my wife have that rule in our marriage, no secrets. So the thing that we say to each other all the time is the thing that I least want to tell you is the thing that I'm going to tell you first.
Wow.
And it sucks. It's hard sometimes.
What a vulnerable place to be.
But we say it out loud. We remind ourselves of the motto, and then we do it. And we've had to share some uncomfortable things with each other throughout our marriage. But I always know that my wife is being honest with me, and I try and make it so that she always knows that I'm not hiding anything from her either.
Wow, that's powerful.
But there's more to it than just being like, this is the way we live. It's also like, what are the values that you're pounding into the head of your partner, of yourself, and your kids constantly.
Yeah. And whenever I'm meeting with people and we talk about their family history, you know, I ask, like, how did your parents show love? This is a perfect example of if you're not expressing how you show love or showing or being intentional about how love is shown in your family, people don't know. They grew up and it's like, oh, okay, mom and dad kissed sometimes and they'd say they love each other. Dad get mad, he'd throw something. Mom get mad, she'd get quiet and be, you know, passive aggressive. And that was kind of what we learned. That's a very consistent story. I mean, with variations to it, but it wasn't talked about of like, if you're mad, we need you to do this.
Right.
I need you to let me know.
Right.
And there wasn't any type of explanation. And so being able to explain to your children and to each other, this is my expectation. If you're mad at me, and you go off into another room, my brain doesn't work in that direction of, oh, well, she's gone. And you also need to know your brain's not working that direction. Say, that's one of her ways of doing this. And so we need to go back and forth. You can't just stand there and demand everything that you want from your partner, but you also need to recognize what you do and go, oh, I am not recognizing when there's a communication happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
And be able to start to change that too.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, she leaves and I don't pursue. She wants me to pursue. I want her to come to me. How are we going to change this? And how do we make these small changes?
Exactly. How do you give your partner everything that they need to give you what you need? Yeah. Like, how do you set your partner up to give you everything that you need to be happy? And a lot of times we don't do that. Like, we don't talk about, hey, when I'm feeling hurt or when I'm feeling frustrated or when I'm feeling angry, this is what I need you to do. And if I react this way, this is what I need you to do. Yeah. Yeah. Completely. And it can be so hard thinking of being in a space of, I don't want to do that. Yep. But noticing that your partner is giving you a key to say, this is how you can get close to me. Totally. We had to do that. I mean, we do that regularly in our relationship. So early on in our marriage, I realized Angeline told, she was really honest about this, but she struggles with anxiety sometimes. And a lot of times when Angeline experiences anxiety, she retreats a little bit and just needs time to process and think about what's going on. But I'm a verbal processor. So when she's experiencing anxiety, I would take it as a personal attack, like not an attack, but a criticism of, I'm not being a good enough husband to protect her from whatever's making her anxious. Or even more frequently, I would assume that I was the cause of her anxiety. And so I'd go into fix it mode and I'd be like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. We'll fix it. Come on, let's get to the bottom of this. And it would just make her feel worse. And then I'd start getting anxious because I didn't know what was going on. She wasn't communicating with me. So I started making assumptions of worst case scenario, and I'd start freaking out. And then she'd feel bad because she could tell that her anxiety was causing me anxiety, which made her more anxious. And we started into this spiral, and then her anxiety caused me anxiety, and then my anxiety caused her anxiety. And it was just a really bad situation. And finally, like, we sat down one day and we're like, all right, this is not working. This pattern is not working for us, instead of continuing the pattern. And we created a strategy, and the strategy now is like, when Angeline is feeling anxious, she has to say so. And when she's feeling anxious, my commitment is I'm not going to bug her about it. And I'll just I promised her and myself that I'm not going to make assumptions. And especially about myself. Yeah,
you got to catch. I mean, that is hard to do, to catch those stories that you start telling yourself.
So sometimes I need help, and I'll say, "Is this about me?" And she says no, and I have to trust her. And then I'm like, "Great, take the time you need, and I'm here to talk if you need." And then she goes and takes the time she needs, and she can process it and come back, and we have a conversation, and it's done. Cycle is broken. And we've learned to find these like workarounds to the breakdowns in our relationship, but it's about having the conversation outside of the moment. And most of us don't do that. Most of us don't have a fight and then come back 3 hours later after the fight's over and be like, let's talk about that fight and what went well and what didn't go well. Like, let's talk about like the things we did really well that helped us resolve that, and the things that we could do better next time, so that it isn't such a big deal.
Because that's an uncomfortable conversation to have. Hey, let's go back and touch on a thing that was very uncomfortable for me, and maybe we yelled, or maybe there's something that happened. Let's talk about it. But
that's the thing that helps you get better.
Completely.
Is going back and watching the footage of the previous game and seeing your weaknesses and being like, oh, okay, like,
the worst.
Maybe that wasn't the best move for me. Maybe I should have passed the ball instead of shot.
You get to really hone in on what changes you'd like to make. And I'm curious as to when you saw this cycle happening with you and Angeline, did you, at the very end of all of it, after you're feeling anxious, she's feeling anxious, and you're bouncing back and forth, did you guys end up finding yourself separate and feeling lonely or isolated?
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Okay, constantly. That's what I tend to see with couples coming in as well, and even in my own relationship, that the majority of the time when we're having our relationship patterns, I mean, this can happen in a matter of seconds, minutes, hours, but ultimately we get a lot of these couples that come in and they feel isolated afterwards. There's no connection. There's minimal closeness because you're feeling hurt, the other person's feeling hurt, and we have no way of turning toward each other. And this space afterwards that you're talking about is amazing.
Do you know why that happens?
Only through emotionally focused therapy. So
there's a researcher at the University of Utah. I think he's retired now. His name's Alan Fogel. And a lot of his research he researched the brain. And I'm really excited. I'm going to talk to him on Friday.
No way.
But one of the things that he's learned in his studies is that the way that your brain interprets physical pain and the way that it interprets emotional pain are very similar. They're not identical, but some of the same areas of the neuro wavelength. I don't know what he calls it. It's just your brain interprets it similarly. And so, if you think about the way that you react to physical pain, like if you burn your hand on a stove or somebody goes to punch you in the face, your instinct is to flinch and to pull away from the thing that caused you pain. And I think emotionally we do the exact same thing, but we don't recognize it. We have an emotional flinch. And so when you get hurt by your partner, whether it's, snapping at them when they have anxiety, or getting angry at them because they didn't unload the dishwasher when they said they would, or maybe they bounced a check or overdrew your account, or they didn't follow the budget, or maybe they turned you down for sex. Like anything that happens that causes you pain, like your instinct is to pull away from the thing that caused you pain.
Yeah.
So you create that space. That's why you feel lonely in your relationship.
Wow.
That's why you feel like you're walking on eggshells in your relationship. That's why you feel like there's certain topics that are off limits, is because like those are the pain points in your relationship, and you've created this awkward space where you're
the emotional flinch.
Yeah, the emotional flinch. It causes this like emotional distance between you and your partner. And the only way to get close again is to like apologize. You have to heal each other in a sense. And that healing, a lot of people miss it.
Yeah.
And then what happens is over a 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, these little cuts, these little wounds, these little emotional spaces, they scar over, and they become like this permanent gap between the two of you. And then when your kids leave the house or whatever, it's why you see the divorce rate. Like there's a huge percentage of divorces that happen in the first 7 years of marriage, and then another huge spike in divorce after the kids leave the house.
Wow.
Because when the kids leave the house, you're forced to confront and be with this person one-on-one that you haven't been with in like 20, 25 years one-on-one. And you realize that there's all this space between you, and you're like, what happened? Like, we used to have this thing and we don't have this thing anymore. It's because you didn't take care of it. You kept hurting it and pushing your partner away, a lot of times unintentionally, without healing the wound. And so there's this giant trust gap. There's this giant emotional gap between you and the other person. And a lot of people just decide it's easier to start over than it is to try and heal the 20 years of wounds.
Definitely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry, I felt like I rambled a little bit.
No, I mean, from what I'm getting from what you're saying, when it comes down to these emotional cuts, everything like that, what I'm hearing you say is that we have these resentments that can come up. And if you don't speak the resentments, if you don't speak what's happening, it just calluses over, and you start to react to it, or you just leave it alone.
Right.
And then you have to face it some point in time, or you end the relationship because you don't want to face those.
Yeah.
And even
once
then,
you punch me in the face so many times, if I keep coming back to the place where you're going to punch me in the face, I'm just not going to go there anymore. Yeah. And then there's an area of our relationship where the intimacy and the communication and the connection is gone
completely.
So.
And when it comes down to, again, the couples that I see, what I end up finding is that people want to make this change, but they want to make the change through the other person.
Right.
And this is where
isn't that like
hard.
Half of couples therapy is convincing the person who dragged their partner in that it's not their partner's problem?
Yep. That it's a relationship problem.
Yeah.
And that you get the chance to look at what am I doing to add to this relationship problem, even if it is like, oh, well, he's looking at pornography, and if we can just change that, the relationship would end. Or she never has sex with me, or she doesn't clean the house when I'm off working all day, or he never comes home and is emotionally connected to me.
And I have an emotional load that's just too heavy to bear, and so he needs to just step up at home, or she needs to step up and whatever.
Yeah, and all of it begins with, what are you doing? And both need to look at what am I doing, and how am I going to change myself, and what's comfortable to me, to then change that. And that's exactly what I'm hearing you say, is you got to have those uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah. And be, who said this a while ago? The best thing you can do when your partner brings something up that you don't like about yourself, the best thing that you can do is take ownership of as much of it as you can, instead of being defensive or attacking back.
Oh, yeah.
It's a hard thing to do. That is so hard. If your partner comes to you and says, like, I've noticed lately that the majority of the dishes are your mess, and you've been leaving your laundry out, and it's really starting to frustrate me. I feel like I'm lonely, and I'm doing all the housework myself, and man, it's really frustrating, and I need you to step it up. Mm-hmm. Instead of being like, well, I do all this stuff. I mow the lawn, and I take care of the garden, and I don't see you out there helping me. Mm-hmm. And plus, remember that time when I did the laundry all by myself 2 weeks ago, and I did all of it, and you didn't help, and I just put it all away, and like, doesn't that get to, what about that time to prove that it's not all you, instead of going into excuse mode or defensive mode or attacking mode, you go, hey, I get it. Mm-hmm. I probably have been slacking in the dishes in the laundry department. I apologize. I could probably step up my game.
Oh, man. And how hard that can be.
Yeah.
Oh, it brings up, I think of my experiences, like it brings up that tightness in my chest from like, oh man, I don't like being that wrong one where it's like, okay, you're right. No,
but that's how relationships get better is both partners. Like I'm a firm believer that the purpose of relationships is personal growth. Mm-hmm. The purpose of being in a relationship is, like there's nothing better in your life to help you grow as a human being, because you're constantly being forced to confront things you would never willingly confront in yourself if you were alone. Mm-hmm. And so having this other person in your life to confront you and be like, yo, you're dirty, or, hey, you're not pulling your weight, or have you noticed you do this weird thing that is like super annoying in public, you pick your nose or you smack your lips or what are little things and big things, doesn't matter. You would never put yourself in a position to be confronted with that stuff. But when you're in a relationship, you are. And if you want your relationship to survive, you have to confront it and push through it. You have to push the boundaries of who you are to become somebody you've never been in order to have a relationship that survives and continues to grow and flourish.
Yeah. Completely. So. And we start talking about this emotional connection or being able to confront difficult topics. And this brings us right back into many questions that couples have about like, well, how can we have more sex? Or why are we not having sex?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about vulnerability and intimacy, if we're not building it on the outskirts of the relationship, meaning the way that we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis, how are we supposed to be like, yeah, that's all right. Like, I really trust you and I'd like to be naked with you and I'd like to experience this emotional connection with you in these other ways when I can't trust that you're not going to punch me in the face, or you're not going to hurt me in another way through making fun of me, or if I slip up somehow that you're not going to be.
Yeah. I remember, for example, I have an acquaintance who was married and his wife came home one day and said something along the lines of, oh, did you hear about so-and-so? She caught her husband looking at porn. If I ever caught you looking at porn, we'd get a divorce. No questions asked. Mm-hmm. And he had looked at porn, and in the back of his head, he's like, crap, now I need to hide this.
Yeah.
I need to hide this because if she finds out about this thing about me, I'm going to lose my kids and I'm going to lose her. I'm going to lose everything I've worked forward to. So he started feeling this pressure to keep secrets. And then he started to think in his mind, well, what other things would she freak out about? Mm-hmm. If porn is bad enough that she divorced me, like what if I overdraw on the bank account? Or like, what if a girl flirts with me while I'm at school or at work or whatever? Or what if something bad happens and do I need to hide it from her if I screw up? And it created this kind of culture of secrecy and punishment, needing to hide the bad stuff that you do.
Yeah, the imperfections.
Yeah, the imperfections. And then when you have that kind of a culture in your relationship, you can't cultivate intimacy because you can't be completely intimate. Like when I think of the word vulnerability, I think of somebody removing all their armor.
Yeah.
So that it's possible to hurt them in any way possible. That's what, like if a soldier is vulnerable, it means he's exposed. And I think of all of the people who go into their bedrooms with their armor on, their metaphorical armor, but it has basically the same effect as physical armor, where you're not going to be able to have sex with somebody or be intimate with somebody if you've got full plate armor on. Mm-hmm. You got to take that stuff off and be truly seen. But if you don't feel safe taking your stuff off, taking your armor off in front of your partner, then man, like you're never going to have that level of intimacy in your relationship of truly knowing the other person, because there's always going to be a protection up. There's always going to be something that you're hiding or trying to like prevent from being hurt. Completely. Yeah.
One of the things that I find interesting as I work with couples in sex therapy is that, I mean, a lot of people are like, well, oh yeah, as long as I'm having sex with them once a week or, a couple times a week or however often they've decided, that's still not what, and I'll use this in a heteronormative male to female, but a lot of times like, well, as long as the guy is having sex, then he's going to be happy. And that's not the case. There's so much emotional connection and a drive to be wanted.
Nobody wants duty sex.
Nobody wants duty sex.
Like it's not the act of sex itself that is what people want. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of women, I'm going to be I've heard this more from women than from men. So this is like a broad sweeping judgment. If it doesn't apply to you, let it go. But if it does, like, think about it a little bit. But I think a lot of women culturally have developed this idea that all men want is a physical release, and that's what's valuable to them when it comes to sex. But when you talk to men and ask them what they get out of sex and why it's important to them, like, maybe this is a great thing you can do on date night is ask your partner, what does sex mean to you? Like, what do you get out of it? And I think you'll be surprised that it goes way beyond the physical for men. Yeah. It's not just like, oh, I get to experience an orgasm. It goes way beyond that. And it's about emotional connection and being present and being seen and being accepted for who you are. And there's so much more that we need that culture doesn't really portray us needing.
Exactly. Yeah, it comes down to what men are supposed to be experiencing, what women are supposed to be experiencing, and this covers into homosexual relationships as well, where we've got two men or two women or anywhere along the spectrum of sexuality, where however you're experiencing your partner and your sexuality, even in asexuality, what is it that you want to express and you want to experience? And if we're not connecting those, or if you're not expressing that, or you're not experiencing it, sex is not just orgasm or just being close to someone. It can be so many other things. I mean, we get the, I believe it's called the lesbian deathbed, where there's no sexuality being expressed at all because it is so vulnerable to get to a certain place, and so there's nothing that's happening. Yeah. Or you get I hear a lot of in the gay community when it comes to men that it's like, well, this is all that you want is a sexual experience, and it's not that all about the physical nature of it. Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious about, is you you've interviewed so many different people, from Jennifer Finlayson 5 to a couple that is somewhere, I believe, in the United States, where they've had sex every day. And
Yeah. I've interviewed a lot of people.
Yeah, you've interviewed a lot of people. Is it comes to, is there like an interview that has been one that has stood out to you the most, or that's affected your relationship or the way that you viewed relationships the most? Or is it kind of, we've been combining all of these too.
Yeah, there's several that have really deeply affected me. One of the more recent ones that I think has had a huge impact, not only on me, but on my wife, is the Figgies.
The Figgies.
David and Gretchen Figgy. Great episode, and they've become really dear friends to us. But what really hit home with that relationship, or with that interview, excuse me, is what happened before the interview. So I got invited to their house, and they insisted on feeding me dinner before we had an interview. That kind of tells you what kind of people they are. They're just really giving and kind and welcoming people. And I go into their house, and they're wrapping up the cooking, and David introduces me to his wife, and she's cooking over the stove, and we're having a conversation. And then he looks at her and says, "Honey, what can I do to help? Like, what do you need?" And she's like, "Oh, could you help set the table?" And he says, "Absolutely." And so he starts setting the table, and we're having a conversation as he's setting the table. And he's like, "Oh, sweetheart, I can't find the napkins. Do you know where they are?" And she said, "Oh yeah, no problem. They're just in that drawer." And he's like, "Oh, I looked in there. I didn't see them." And she's like, "Oh, I think they're just back behind the picture." And he's like, "Oh, I love you. Thank you so much for your help." And she goes, "Anytime, sweetheart." And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, they're pouring it on thick, you know. They know that I'm interviewing about their relationship tonight, and they want to put on a good show for me. And they are, anyway. So what happened is, during dinner, I looked at them, and I was like, before we started this interview, I need to ask, are you guys being for real, or is this really how you are around each other all the time, or is this just like when we're in public that you're this kind to each other? Like, I don't want to be offensive, but I'm really curious. And they looked at me and almost kind of like, "Oh, you poor guy. You are just like everybody else." And they're like, we look at our friends in our lives, and not just at people in general, at the relationships out there. And they're like, "Just watch. You'll see people treat complete strangers with more kindness and dignity and respect than they treat the person who's supposed to be the most important in their lives. They hold open doors, they use their pleases and thank yous, they're kind, they ask for forgiveness if they bump into them. They're super, super polite with people they don't even know. But the people that they spend all day, that they choose to share their lives with, they're the meanest to and the most short-tempered with. And they said early on in our marriage, we made the commitment that the person, that our partner would be, they would know that they're the most important person in our lives by the way that we speak to them and by the way that we treat them. So we always use our pleases and thank yous. We're always kind to each other. We always tell each other that we love each other. And this is just how we are with each other. You can tell how, like David was saying, you can tell how important Gretchen is to me by how I speak to her. And you can see it. And you can see how she responds to it and vice versa. And I felt so ashamed that I had even asked the question.
Wow.
I felt guilty that I was like, is this how you always are? Because nobody else does that. And it made me realize how something so simple as just being conscious of how I treat my partner and being intentional with the words that I choose so that I'm always communicating to Ange, you're the most important person to me. I love you and respect you more than anybody else. That changed everything. It changes everything. And we're constantly, she sent me a text this morning and she's like, I realize I've been a little bit short with you lately and that's not the way I want to treat you as my husband. And I just wanted to apologize and recommit to treating you with the most love and respect out of anybody in my life. And I'm like, awesome, and we're constantly checking back into that. And I know it might sound silly to people listening, or it might sound a little over the top, but man, the way that you treat yourself and the way that you treat your partner has an impact on how you value something. And how you value the relationship. And that one little thing has made a huge, huge impact on our relationship.
Well, and I want to call out to anyone that's listening as well. Take note of how you're feeling about as Nate's talking about this, because if you're starting to feel, there's a chance that you're feeling like, no, I'm not going to do that. Or that's so stupid.
That's so dumb.
There might even be this fear of I don't want to change what's going on. I'd have
resistance.
The resistance. Notice the resistance. A great word. The resistance that you might be feeling, or the excitement, or whatever emotion's coming up for you, because this resistance is a piece of that needs to be called out.
Yeah.
That needs to be why am I so resistant to calling my partner honey, sweetheart, or being able to change how I am? And some of it might even be that, okay, we're not up to where we would like to be in the relationship, or let's not get into the comparison factor, but understand that this is true, that there's a really good chance that you're not treating your partner the way that you would treat a stranger.
Yeah. And this plays into the Gottman's Four Horsemen a lot.
Yes. I've been dying to hear your experience, because you went to a training.
Yeah, we did. Ange and I just went a couple weeks ago and did the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work leadership training.
Love that book.
And so now we can lead the 7 Principles program. It's a lot of fun. But those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are the 4 warning signs that are the biggest threat to the longevity and success of a relationship. And the most damaging of the 4 horsemen is contempt.
Okay. And that's the one that I think is the hardest one, not the hardest to define. However, it's a word that we don't use in everyday language. Can you tell us about contempt?
It's when you're diminishing your partner or putting yourself above your partner, when you're attacking their character, when you're saying things like, you're so stupid, or you always do this wrong. I can't believe you. You're so ridiculous. You're so dirty. I always clean the house and you're the dirty one. And just trying to make them feel small. When you're swearing at them, any sort of physical intimidation would be contempt. Throwing things in order to intimidate, screaming or yelling, name calling. That's why I say it's the opposite. The opposite of contempt, the best way to get rid of contempt, which is the leading indicator of whether or not your relationship will survive. So if you're sitting there thinking oh crap, we name call, or oh crap, I throw things, or oh crap, I accuse my partner of being stupid or unattentive, or not making me a priority, or try and make him or her feel bad for the things that they do in our relationship, the best way to cure that is gratitude. How do you, instead of looking for their flaws and pointing out the things that are wrong with them, look for the virtues and the things that they're doing right. Look for the opportunities. And I don't care who you are and how bad your relationship is, there's something you can be grateful for.
Yeah.
Even if it's thank you for sticking around, even though this has sucked lately. Like, we've been at each other's throats. This has been really horrible. We're going through something really difficult right now, and you're still here. And I'm really grateful. And that's all I can be grateful for right now, is that you're sticking with it. But I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
And focus on that. And then tomorrow it's, I'm really grateful that you came home today because you didn't have to. And I'm really grateful that maybe you went to work or that you emptied the dishwasher. Or I'm really grateful that you put the kids to bed. I know they're your kids too, and it's not always my job to put them to bed. But guess what? Even though we shared the kids, it still felt really nice that you took that job tonight and took it off my hands.
Touching on gratitude or being able to start. And that is the opposite of the contempt.
That is the cure for contempt. It is the opposite, but it's also the cure.
It's the cure for contempt.
Yeah.
So when you say the cure, that helps to change the verbiage of how you view and see your partner. Instead of seeing them as stupid, it's like, oh, well, you actually show up and you're here day after day, even though this is really annoying, or you burn food, but you're trying.
Right.
Versus, why do you always burn the dinner? Being like, thank you so much for putting an effort into something that's difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
You made dinner. I appreciate it. I didn't have time to make dinner.
I didn't have to. Yeah.
It doesn't taste great, but you know what? It's the effort that counts in this. There's something powerful about rewarding the effort and not the outcome. So let me explain. I read a really interesting article lately about dog training. And they said basically there's two ways to train a dog. You can use punishment and punish the dog for doing the wrong thing, or you can use positive reinforcement and reward the dog for doing the right thing, the right behavior. And the dogs that are trained using the punishment method, that are punished for doing the wrong thing all the time, they are more prone to be aggressive towards other humans. When the trainer shows up to like get them for their training session, they cower in the corner. They're more afraid. They bark more. They're just more aggressive dogs in general, and they're less likely to have the behavior last long term that they're learning. They obey out of fear, not out of willingness to please.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, the dogs that are trained using the reward method, they are more friendly, they're more docile, they're more eager to be around people, and they're more obedient over the long term. And it's interesting that like the way that we teach kids new behaviors is often the reward system. Like if a kid is learning to talk or walk and he falls down or says a word wrong, we don't berate the kid and tell him how stupid he is for falling down or how incompetent he is that he didn't say the word right. We congratulate them, encourage them to keep trying, and we reinforce the effort. We don't we don't reward the outcome. But when it comes to our partner, we somehow have developed this cultural mentality that we can punish our partner into good behavior. That if we can just tell them how stupid they are and how incompetent they are and how point out all the ways in which they're failing to be a good partner or a good spouse, that they're suddenly going to wake up and be like, oh, you're right. I do all those things wrong. I better step up my game and change things. It doesn't help. The way that humans in general and any animal, if we really want to get positive change out of them, the best way to do it is to reinforce effort, the positive effort that we enjoy seeing. So if he buys you flowers, but he doesn't buy you the right flowers that you like, still be grateful and praise the flowers. Or if she makes dinner, but she burns the dinner, you can be grateful for the effort and tell her how great of a wife she is and eat the dinner, even if it's terrible. Choke it down and lay on the praise, because if she feels like she's being a success in a certain area of her relationship and she's being appreciated for a specific effort, she's going to continue to make the effort. Yes. And the dinners will get better. But the moment you're like, my wife and I experienced this a couple weeks ago. We were folding laundry and I folded her shirt or something like that. And I was like, is there a specific way you want this folded? And she said, no. And I said, great. So I folded it and then put it down next to me, and she picked it up and refolded it.
Oh my gosh. And
I was like, okay. obviously there is a particular way that you want this folded, and you can fold your shirts. And for like 3 or 4 weeks, I would do the laundry and I would fold my clothes, and then I would just leave her clothes on the bed and let her fold them and put them away. Because obviously there's a way that she wants them done. And I was pissed. Like I wasn't going to go in and do all this work to do her laundry for her and then just have her to redo it because I didn't do it right. And then she started to get hurt after a while. And she's like, I don't understand why you're doing this. Like, why won't you fold my laundry too? Like, when I do the laundry, I fold your laundry. And I was like, it's because I don't care how my stuff's folded. You obviously do care how your stuff's folded. And she started crying and she's like, I'm sorry. You're right. I did do that thing. Whoa. And she owned up to it. And she's like, can you please fold my laundry? Please. I promise not to correct you ever again about laundry. If you will just do my laundry, just fold my shirts again. And we ended up figuring it out. But like, if you just constantly tell your partner they're doing something wrong and they're not doing something right, they're going to stop trying. Because it's way easier to just let you do it your way than just constantly be a failure. Yeah.
I've had that exact same experience. Natalie, she worked in the, was it Route 21 business?
Oh, so she's an expert folder.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, pants, shirts, everything. And then I, went into to do the laundry and stuff like that. And I folded stuff and then watched her refold the entire thing.
And you're like, never again.
I was like, nope, I can do my laundry. I'll get the laundry done. I'll do that.
Right.
But then
I'll roll my own underwear up into balls or whatever.
And that was at the very beginning of the relationship. Yeah. And it's same ordeal. And ultimately, trying back and forth. And then it didn't bother her to that point. And then I finally came up, I was like, hey, I want to do this, but I'm so afraid you're going to refold everything, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have you double work.
Emptying the dishwasher is another popular one. And I didn't realize this, but my wife loves the cups upside down.
The cup
cupboard
upside down thing.
And I don't do that. And I've found out a couple weeks ago that our entire marriage, it's been kind of bugging her, but she's like, it's not something that's important. So I've chosen not to bring it up, but she prefers them upside down.
And how simple it can be for either.
Yeah. It's so funny though, because when I empty the dishwasher, they're right side up, and then I can always tell when she's emptied the dishwasher because all the cups are upside down. So anyway,
a lot of small things like that are so interesting.
But they build up. And if you get enough of those things where you're telling your partner you're wrong, you're going to be the one who's emptying the dishwasher, and you're going to be the one who's folding the laundry, and you're going to be the one who's cleaning the shower, because every time your partner tries to help, if they do it wrong, they're not going to be inclined to help you and down the road. Yeah. So maybe that's another good thing to think about if you're listening and you're feeling like you're carrying a lot of the load yourself. Is there a way that you're punishing your partner for not doing something right, or AKA not doing it your way? Exactly. And is there a way that you can, instead of only rewarding the outcome that you want, start to reward the effort that you want to see? Because the effort will end up resulting in more of that effort and improved over time. Yeah, exactly. I love everything we've been talking about when it comes to making that change, because that positive, that gratitude is really right there. So good. Well, I'm curious about, we're getting towards the end of the time that we've got today, but I really want to hear about your 1% Club, as well as like you just started that. And also I know you're putting together date nights. Yeah. I'm excited to talk about both those things. So the 1% Club, I've wanted to start this for a really long time. Have you ever heard the Jim Rohn quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with? Yep. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that that's true. Like, it's important to surround yourself with people who share your values and your drive. And if you're surrounding yourself with people who are negative, you're going to turn into a negative person, and vice versa. And so I took that a step further, and my idea is that your relationship is the average of the 5 marriages or the 5 relationships, 5 couples you spend the most time with. And if you're constantly surrounding yourself with people who are complaining about their partner, or who aren't investing in their relationship, or who are nags, or they're lazy and they're not committed, or they're impolite and unkind, then you're going to develop those same behaviors. But if you're surrounding yourself with people who are constantly striving to be better, and constantly examining their marriage and wanting to do better, and waking up every morning thinking, how can I be the best possible partner today? That mentality and that behavior is going to be contagious. So I've developed the 1% Club, and it's basically a community of people who are committed to being the best possible partner. And every I try and provide them with as many resources as possible and things to contemplate on a very regular basis to level up their game. So we have a private Facebook group, and then every month, at least once a month, I interview one of the top experts in the world about how we can have stronger and better marriages. And this is stuff that like doesn't end up on my podcast. It doesn't end up on my blog. It's only inside the 1% Club. And it's the kind of stuff that like a lot of people would pay thousands of dollars for at a conference or hundreds of dollars for in therapy. And we're getting it in the 1% Club for like, it's like $10 a month or something like that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's the 1% Club. And my goal is to just grow it into a place where the top couples in the world want to hang out and learn and constantly grow their relationship.
Yeah. And I've been participating in the Facebook.
You're a
one.
1%er.
I'm a 1%er. I love it.
That connotation used to be really negative, but now I'm hoping to change it.
For the motorcycle gang. That's
that and Romney's 1%, or was back in the election, the top 1% of the world owns all the wealth or whatever.
Yeah, so that 1%, and then you got I ride motorcycles, and so it's like the 1%ers are the ones that like the dangerous biker gang you could run into.
Oh yeah, the scary guys that will like.
Yeah, it's like they've killed and things like that. And now we've got the 1% of the marriages that are amazing.
Yeah, that's the good kind of 1%.
That's the good kind of 1% that we're encouraging everyone to be. But I've loved the insight. I mean, someone will pose a question or you'll throw something up on there, and just the conversation that happens.
It's been really cool to see people bring. It's become a really safe place to talk about hard stuff.
Yeah.
And to have couples come out and be like, hey, this is something that we're really struggling with in our marriage. Have you guys ever dealt with this? And to see other couples jump in and be like, oh yeah, we totally get that. Mm-hmm. You know, we've been there. Here's some ideas that helped us, or here's some insights, here's some encouragement. And it's powerful to be part of a community that's has that kind of mindset. And
you've pulled out some questions that I found are really interesting. Something like, you know, what is the thing you cherish most about your partner? Yeah. And all of a sudden I post knowing that my wife is on there, and it's like, okay, she's on, and then she posts something like, oh my goodness, that's like the question that we haven't asked each other, and this is super cool. And then you get to have cuddle time that night. Yeah, cuddle time. And talk about what you love about each other. It's like, that was really nice of you to say in front of the 1%. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Yeah, I'm enjoying that. And then also you got the Loveumentary that, are we in season? We are in season. We're about to wrap up, I think, our last couple of episodes, and then I need to touch base with Kristen and see if she wants to continue. But nice, yeah, because you've been co-hosting with her. Yeah, right? You've been host and she's co-host. This last season, has she been on she hasn't been on the podcast yet. No, not on Birds and Bees. So this last season, I've been recording the Loveumentary with Kristen Hodson, who's licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist, ASEX certified sex therapist. And we've been talking about, I think that's the first time I've got her entire title right. You nailed it. I was like, yeah. And we've been talking about all things. We've started it at basically Sex 101, and started with the very first episode of the season is how do you talk to your partner about sex? And we've talked a lot about like, how to cultivate desire, and we've talked about what happens to your body after you get pregnant and how your desire levels can change, and we've talked about lube and fantasy and foreplay and all sorts of really interesting things that people have a lot of questions about or don't know a lot about because they've just never been taught it. And there's actually a lot to learn that can really benefit your relationship if you're willing to listen. Yeah. So that's been a really fun season, just being with her because she's so smart and so wonderful. Yeah. And been a lot of fun. And now the two of us plus two other people are planning a big event in Salt Lake City at the end of April. April 27th? Date night. Yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun, and really excited about it. It's going to be kind of a cross between a TED event where we'll have 4 speakers, but it's going to be a lot more fun and interactive and educational and exciting. Yeah. 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 It's exciting. We're stoked. It's going to be way cool. So UtahDateNight.com if people want tickets. Oh, nice. UtahDateNight.com. I'm sure your audience goes far beyond Utah, but for those people who are here in the Salt Lake area. We've got a lot in Australia that are listening. Hi, Australia. G'day. G'day, mate. Let's put another... Oh, that's when it actually works. Let's put another shrimp on the barbie. But that's when, what's his name was saying about Austria. Yeah. That's where from Dumb and Dumber. Dumb and Dumber. Yeah. Love it. Sorry, Australia. But yeah, no, we've had a lot of different listeners from the UK, a couple in Russia. Sweet. Yeah, way sweet stuff. And well, if you guys want to fly across the pond and come to date night, you're welcome to. Yeah, in the middle of April. And Yeah. Other than that, I think that, gosh, all these questions that we've just been talking about.
Yeah. What else you want to talk about? I got a few more minutes.
I was like, I think that looking through all of it, we pretty much covered so many different. Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about fighting in a relationship.
Yeah.
Especially because it seems as though a lot of people are talking about if you don't fight, then you're in a really good relationship.
I'm writing about this right now. Like, if you look over your shoulder, there's an article that I'm writing about this right now.
Nice.
So the theory is that if you don't argue, you have a good relationship, or that it's better for your relationship to let little things roll off your shoulder. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a bad myth. That's the worst advice ever.
Mm-hmm. Just don't let it bother you. Don't worry about it.
Just let the little things slide off your back. Mm-hmm. No big deal. Don't sweat the small stuff. Science shows that that's actually really, really bad advice. The happiest couples, and this goes back to John Gottman's research again, have what's called a low negativity threshold, or basically a low tolerance for negativity in the relationship. If you have a high tolerance for negativity, that means a lot of negative stuff can happen in a relationship before you talk about it. If you have a low tolerance for negativity, it means that once something happens that's like painful or hurtful, you just address it in that moment because you don't have a tolerance for it. You don't allow for it to build up. And the happiest couples are the ones who are constantly in conversation with each other, talking about what works and what doesn't, what's happening, what's not happening, what they want more of, what they want less of, and if something hurtful happens, they work it out. Mm-hmm. And what happens in the couples who have a high tolerance for negativity is that the hurts and the little things build up and they build up and they build up and they build up and they build up until somebody finally breaks and explodes, and they have like 6 months of grievances that they just unload on their partner out of nowhere. And it ends up being there's a really great analogy that I like. It's called Jordan Peterson shares it in one of his talks, but he talks about how in a forest fire is actually good. Yeah.
Yep, it's right there.
It's on my article.
It's on the article right here.
So the idea is that every so often it's good for a forest to experience a fire because dead wood accumulates in a forest. Trees fall over, branches fall off, and the dead wood accumulates. And when a fire goes through and burns off all the dead wood, then the ash and the nutrients from the dead wood go and enrich the soil, and more trees and plants can grow in the forest. But if you prevent the fire from happening and the dead wood builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up, it gets to the point where the forest is just full of dead wood, and lightning strikes, and the fire blazes so hot and so powerful that not only does it burn all the trees in the forest, but it burns the topsoil all the way down to the bedrock, and then nothing can grow again.
Wow.
And that's a powerful, it's a powerful statement, a powerful analogy to a relationship. Like, it's okay to have the occasional burn off the dead wood in your relationship. Mm-hmm. But if you wait too long and let too much dead wood build up over the years, and then you try and burn it off, it's going to be an out of control blaze, and you're going to lose control of yourself and of your relationship, and it might destroy the relationship.
Yeah.
So it's better to just like gather the dead wood like once a week or once every day even, and just have a little bonfire and throw the dead wood in and burn it and scatter the ash and let it nourish your relationship and continue to help things grow. Get rid of the bad stuff that isn't working for you in your relationship and cultivate the good stuff. Mm-hmm. Way better to do that than to just pretend like there is no bad stuff and let the dead wood accumulate and then completely just go off one day like a bombshell the moment a lightning strikes.
You tend to feel more justified when those bombs go off.
Yeah.
Like, well, you do this and this and this and this, and so why does this? And you can't hear each other.
No, you can't. It's hard to communicate clearly and effectively when you're in the midst of basically losing your life. Like if you're in a giant forest fire, you're going to be in the mindset of self-preservation. Mm-hmm. But if you have a little bonfire that you have control and you have a little rock ring around it and you're the one who started it, it's a lot easier to like keep your wits about you.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
And even make s'mores.
Yeah.
You can build off of
whatever you really can.
Yeah.
And you can keep yourself warm.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good things that you can see within a relationship as you're burning that wood.
Yeah. And if you can learn to come together over the fire it can be a really beautiful and bonding experience. But if the fire gets out of control, it can destroy everything.
Completely.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that gratitude comes in as well.
Yeah. And there's a research that shows that the happiest couples have a ratio of 20 positive interactions to every one negative interaction. And in times of conflict, like when the fire's burning, they have a ratio of 5 positive interactions to every one negative interaction. So even when you're in the middle of the bonfire, you can still be positive and kind and cultivate a positive relationship with each other by holding each other's hands or looking into each other's eyes, by telling little jokes, even if you're in the middle of conflict. That's one of my favorite things, is when you're like yelling at each other, not yelling at each other, but you're in a heated conversation and then somebody cracks a joke and you just start laughing and you realize that the thing you're arguing about isn't that big of a deal. That your relationship is way more important than the thing you're talking about. Such a reaffirming thing to experience. But those little things count. They're a big deal.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Maybe this goes into my last question, but if you were to start someone off, a couple is like, I don't want to have a mediocre love anymore. Is there something that you would recommend or say, hey, start off right here?
Yeah, I would start by, that's a great question, by the way. I would start by looking at your biggest weaknesses and thinking to yourself, how can I get 1% better every day? Like, not how this isn't about how do I transform my marriage right now or my relationship right now. It's about, okay, what do I need to do? What is something actionable I can do every single day to make my marriage better every day, or make me better as a partner every day? So,
wow,
trying to think, it's that daily continuous improvement is huge. So, like my wife and I lately have been texting each other, and this is just a thing we're doing right now. It might change, but we text each other every day in the morning and say, what's one thing I can do today to show you I love you?
Wow, that's amazing. Get feedback.
Yeah. So I know every day she's like, I would love it if you'd make dinner. I'm like, great, I can make dinner. Done. She comes home from work. She sees dinner on the table, and she's like, oh my gosh, you're the best husband in the world. And I'm like, you set me up for success, baby. You made it easy. Thank you.
Bump, set, spike.
And I'll be like, I just need a back scratch tonight. Can you just scratch my back before we go to bed? That'd be amazing. And I get my back scratched and I just feel so, I feel good or whatever. That's a great place to start to help you understand what's important to your partner. Another great thing would be to like read a book and take something out of the book and find a way to apply it every single day. Like, start with making your bed, little things. How do I make my bed every day? And then keep your room clean, and then keep your house clean. And that mentality of creating order out of chaos will translate into your relationship. Whenever you feel chaos, you'll have the mentality of like trying to create a little bit more order and organization and maybe positive habits. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Nathan.
That works. My mom calls me Nathan.
I saw some of the pictures over here. It's like, Nathan. I'm like, nice. But Nate, I appreciate you being here on the show.
It's my pleasure, dude. Anytime.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more as you're doing all these, your posts and as things come out. I'd definitely love to have you back on.
Well, I hope that somebody listening finds something in this conversation valuable.
If no one else, I did.
Great.
So we'll see you next time, man.
Sounds good.
This has been another episode of the Birds and Bees podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions about the show, comments, or questions you would like addressed in another episode, please give us a call at 385-449-1818. Leave your voicemail and your question, or you can also email us at birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com or visit us online at birdsandbeespodcast.com.